China, guys. We definitely need to raise the tariffs on China. Period. Raise them even higher. I'm definitely in the hardcore camp here. Apparently, I may be one of the only ones out here, based off of some of the comments we've been reading, at least, right? But I would definitely say we need to be at somewhere between 400 to 1,000% tariffs on China. That is the only way that we will literally be able to push out, let's say, Xi Jinping. All right, because there are definitely some people, specifically in Beijing, that are trying to actually, make things work. Okay, Xi Jinping is not doing that at all. He is willing to risk every single person in China rather than basically capitulate to this deal, bro. He does not want to sit down at the table. He doesn't. I mean, I get it. I mean, listen, China's an adversary. They're not allies to us. We're not friends with China. They just make our stuff, bro. Right? And as the tariffs are raising, things are getting more expensive. Americans no longer large scale purchasing things from China. There's a lot of propaganda also being spread around the world to try to elicit some type of emotional reaction. But the problem is that there's going to be none really coming from the West. So the sole purpose of throwing propaganda out there is not really beneficial in your instance here, because we know now exactly what's been going on, right? We need to fix all of these things. And Beijing basically needs to come to the table, not Xi Jinping, because he's not going to. Again, he's willing to risk every single one of his citizens. Right? And of course, this is the CCP. This is a communist government, guys. The only reason he's in power is because he can bring jobs. The tariffs are raised. Guess what happens to him being in power? They built their entire country off of basically building our stuff for the last like 50, 60 years, guys. They've done that. All right. But all right, let's see what this takes us, guys. China turns against Xi Jinping. U.S. tariffs collapse China's economy. This is a suggestion via Discord. Let's go and jump into this video immediately, guys. Let's do it.
That was last time CCP enacted martial law. Chinese citizens took to the street to demand democracy and say no to dictatorship. It seems Xi Jinping didn't learn his lesson because he's talking about enacting martial law again. Here are the details. I hear from multiple channels how Beijing has increased internal control and surveillance, fearing that the de facto trade blockage will cause internal turmoil.
It will.
Perhaps it's too early for that, but the pressure is already felt. Yes, I can confirm. They are preparing for an uptick in unrest, possibly even enacting martial law if needed. Now, the question rises, why is Xi Jinping freaking out again? Why does CCP feel the need to clamp down on its own citizens? Well, that has to do with this trade war and how badly the Chinese economy is already suffering. Local factories are shutting down, Chinese citizens are losing their livelihood, and on top of that, Chinese allies are realizing that they were getting the short end of the stick
the whole
when
time
they were trading with China.
Yep.
Let's start with the local factories.
They say I'm spreading rumors. Let me show you. The factory is on break, waiting for further notice. I need to find temporary workers. This is the reality.
Today, I met with a client in the textile export business. The raw materials had just arrived in the morning, and production was about to start, but by noon, they were hit with news of a 104% tariff. As a result, all the orders were canceled, and the factory immediately announced a shutdown. Sure, we also imposed an 84% tariff on the US, and that did boost morale, right? But after the slogans fade, has anyone really thought about what comes next? The most immediate impact is that many export-focused factories will have to cut production, lay off workers, and a lot of people could lose their jobs.
These people who are losing their jobs are realizing that their government is making a huge mistake. And to distract all these people, CCP is spreading anti-American sentiment all throughout Chinese social media. Every year, China spends 225 billion yuan to hire 4 million internet commentators who are pushing Chinese government's propaganda. There are thousands of them on Twitter, there are likely hundreds of thousands of them on YouTube, and millions and millions of Chinese propagandists on TikTok.
Oh yeah, TikTok, absolutely. YouTube, absolutely. But the problem is that, guys, most of the things that I specifically see, I mean, they're pretty. It's pretty obvious when you're encountering, some type of propaganda specifically coming from China. It becomes pretty obvious. Yes.
In fact, Chinese bot farms on YouTube have been exposed for downvoting any video that criticizes the CCP on this platform. I'm sure they're working overtime right now. This is why, if you guys can do us a quick favor and hit that like and subscribe button down below to counteract the downvoting that the CCP bots do. It can help us out tremendously in the YouTube algorithms. But the biggest weapon CCP has is not the bot farms, it's TikTok. Right now, CCP propagandists, CCP operatives are going mega viral on TikTok. And I'm sure I don't need to remind everyone that TikTok is owned by the CCP, and CCP right now is using it to brainwash our youth, brainwash American citizens. I don't have TikTok myself, but I can see the posts that people are sharing on Twitter saying that once you log into TikTok, every other video you see is about how Americans need to be buying more from China. Americans should buy directly from Chinese websites like JD.com, Temu, and Alibaba. This is exactly why TikTok needs to be banned in the United States. This trade war is the perfect example of what could happen if there is ever a full-on war with China. CCP has direct access to 170 million Americans, and imagine the kind of brainwashing they can do when they control the algorithm, when they store all the American data in China, in Beijing.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm definitely on TikTok, but I think I'm on TikTok by accident. That makes any sense here. I rarely post there. I'm not a super fan of the culture that basically persists on TikTok neither. I do think that it's probably the most toxic of the toxic people in the United States of America. They seem to basically flock and be content creators on that platform here, guys.
It's just one of these propaganda videos that CCP is pushing on TikTok, but the video accidentally exposes the CCP's dirty tricks.
Your made in Italy Gucci 80% come from Chinese factory. They just add the logo in Europe to make you pay the price of 10 times. Close your eyes. If your hammer says made in China, does it feel cheaper? No, that's not a quality issue. It's luxury brand washing. Fun fact, the hand stitching your product, 42% are Chinese artisans. We don't do cheap, we do underrated luxury. Why pay 2,000 Europe for Parisian air? Same leather, same craft, just without the European fairy tale facts. Be a luxury rebel. You can shop on Chinese platforms such as Taobao, 1688, Tianmao, Jingdong. You can even go directly to Guangzhou, Yiwu, Quanzhou, Wenzhou to buy. Don't know how to buy, how to pay, or arrange delivery? Just PM me. GoNest to provide free shopping guidance and shipping services for you.
I'm not
I mean, that's just blatant, guys. I mean, that's just a blatant example.
even gonna focus on the fact that TikTok is banned in China. So this lady definitely either has government's permission to post on here, or she was using a VPN, which is against the Chinese law for Chinese citizens. Now, I doubt that she was using the VPN, and let me explain why. Think about it. If you're a Chinese citizen, you're not going to break the law by using TikTok using a VPN and then post your face all over the TikTok video so that the communist police can show up at your house. That's why I think it's highly likely that she had permission from the Chinese government to post videos like these. Now, why would they do this?
Listen, a lot of the videos that you guys have been showing me lately, at least, I'm absolutely surprised. I have no idea how these videos are being, let's say, seen outside of China or even being created, guys. Right? Like, I would think that if you're showing factories, massively empty with no workers, even though you just said you're looking for workers, but why aren't they working there then? If you're looking for workers, there are people that are struggling right now, not being able to get inside of the factories to work, but you're looking for them. That's a weird video, bro. Right? I mean, why is it empty? A couple of questions here, but either way, some of it just feels, like propaganda.
The answer is clear. They want to spread propaganda in the United States, and with TikTok, they have the perfect tool to reach hundreds of millions of Americans.
Absolutely.
And that's just an insane number to say. But unfortunately, she accidentally exposes the CCP tactic that President Trump and the Trump administration is trying to fight. You see in the video how she states that all these products are made in China, then they're just taken overseas and the label is changed? Well, this is the exact practice that US wants to stop. Chinese companies have set up warehouses in Vietnam, Cambodia mainly, but I'm sure other countries like she mentions in the TikTok.
Guys, this is also why I'm telling you guys when it comes down to Cambodia, Cambodia should be hit with the exact same amount of tariff that China has, specifically Cambodia.
Yes, in Vietnam, Cambodia mainly.
Vietnam
but
also,
sure
but
other countries, like
specifically Cambodia.
Where these warehouses are not used for anything but to bring in the Chinese products that are made in China, and the only thing that these warehouses do is change the label. They'll take out the made in China label and they'll put in made in Vietnam or made in Cambodia label. This way, they can redirect all the products to United States while not paying the tariffs that Trump put in his first term and Biden extended while he was in office. This means that the trade we would do with China is much bigger than the official number shows, and it also means that our trade deficit is much bigger with China.
Thing like the sort of reset they're talking about now seems where we're going, where you need a very drastic reset with China. In theory, you need a reset with other people, but what we really need to get them to do is also reset things with China. I think the rough numbers are that about a quarter of the U.S. trade deficit is bilaterally with China, but another quarter is indirectly with China. So China is sort of half the problem, and so it's selling components that then get reassembled elsewhere. And then China is the geopolitical rival. So there's a way in which if people in Mercedes in Germany are selling cars to the U.S., we might want to have those pretty well-paying jobs in the U.S. and not in Germany. And there are all kinds of sort of mercantilist policies that at the margins Germany engages in. But it's probably not going to repurpose the Mercedes factory to build tanks to invade the U.S. or something like this. Yeah. Whereas this this sort of dual use problem is the problem with China. And so it's
now the TikTok video that CCP is pushing, telling Americans to not buy from American companies but rather buy directly from Chinese websites. That's not even that bad, and I know that sounds crazy to say, because some other videos we have Chinese operatives basically pushing for violence in the United States. They're basically telling US citizens to attack government officials because this trade war is actually making a dent in Chinese economy. Here's that video.
They rob you blind and you thank them for it. That's a tragedy. That's a scam. That's why I'm saying this right now. Americans, you don't need a tariff. You need a revolution. For decades, your government and oligarchs ship your job to China. Not for diplomacy, not for peace,
for profit,
but to exploit cheap laborers. And in the process, they hollowed out your middle class, crashed your working class, and told you to be proud while they sold your future for profit. And yes, China made money.
Yes.
But we used it to build roads, lift millions out of poverty.
What does that have to do with us?
Fund healthcare, raise living standard. We reinvested in our people.
Okay.
My family also benefited from it. What did your oligarchs do? They bought yachts, private jets, mansions with golf course drive.
Here's the thing, guys. I'm trying to find the wrong in his statement, right? It's not wrong. Just gonna be honest. Yeah, basically. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But give us our jobs back. Is it your? Oh God, guys. When you decided to undercut the work, I mean, I get it, bro. Cheap labor is real out there. Okay, it's real. It is absolutely crazy. I don't think the companies that specifically move their jobs overseas specifically and then still proceed to sell in the United States of America, I'm not sure these companies should ever be bailed out. And I do think that they should probably be taxed higher, let's say, if that's the case. Right? I hear what you're saying, but I don't want to sit here and agree with what you're saying because it frustrates me to encounter it.
They manipulate the market.
You manipulate not you, but China specifically manipulates every single thing about what you sell to us.
Dodge tax, and poured billions into endless wars. And you get stagnated wages, crippling healthcare costs, cheap dopamine, debt, and flagged wave property made in China while they pick your pocket. For 40 years, both China and the United States benefit from the trade, the manufacturing, but only one of us use that wealth to build. This isn't China's fault. This is yours. You let this happen. You let the oligarchs feed you lies while they made you fat, poor, and addicted. Now they blame China for mess they made. I don't think so. I don't think you need another tariff. You need to wake up. You need to take your country back. I think you need a revolution.
Now, clearly,
No comment.
I'm not going to sit here and say United States doesn't have issues.
Right.
We have a cost of living crisis in many of our major cities. But the situation in China is actually much, much worse. So maybe that Chinese operative who's telling Americans to do something, he should be telling Chinese to overthrow their communist government. And I'm not just making this up. We have data to back this up. China's income inequality is now greater than that of United States.
Absolutely.
So much for communism. And it's important to point out that this is based on data that CCP has made public. As we already know from CCP's GDP data, they have a habit of making things look prettier than they actually
Hey, bro, trust none of that data.
are in reality. And it's highly likely CCP is doing the same thing with the inequality data. That means in reality, China's inequality is even worse than what CCP is letting on. And this is exactly why CCP hires millions and millions of people to spread propaganda on Chinese social media.
Guys, Dubai does the same thing all the time.
Now they're trying to do the same thing here in the United States. They're trying to spread violence here in the United States so the US gives up on this trade war. But unfortunately for Xi Jinping, it seems China is the only one that's trying to fight the United States. All the other Chinese allies are actually with US. And let me explain what I mean by this. YouTube just dropped a mind-boggling announcement. It is paying creators $64 million per day. Why? Well, because YouTube doesn't have enough creators right now. That's why you see videos on your homepage that have less than 1,000 views, like this one. Now, of course, that doesn't mean everyone should start a channel. But
Right.
if you have ever wondered about starting a YouTube channel or a faceless channel, now is the perfect time. YouTube is paying creators millions every single day, and it's pushing newer and smaller channels now more than ever.
Yeah, I've
But
noticed
I'm
that.
sure you have many questions on how to start and grow a channel.
Was it a
I
commercial?
get these questions in my email all the time from some of you guys.
It's like an
That's
ad
why
or
we have
something.
decided many different countries, specifically countries that many would consider to be Chinese allies. And I'm talking about countries like Pakistan, Russia, India, and Vietnam and Cambodia. You see, what China has done is they have given out free money in forms of subsidies and tax incentives to its steel producers. This way, all the steel companies in China have built a factory so big that they produce more steel than what China needs. So they started dumping this steel in other countries.
Right,
But this
other
was a very
markets.
bad news for all the foreign companies because Chinese steel companies are not playing fair. They don't spend as much money to produce steel. They get free money from the CCP, they get free land from the CCP, and they get interest-free loan from the Chinese state-owned banks. That means that they can sell the steel for a much lower price than other foreign companies who
Undercut.
don't get free money from their government.
And that seems to be consistently. I mean, don't get me wrong here. I understand business. I'm a business owner. I understand. Like, if you want to succeed, you kind of need to undercut as many people as humanly possible. It seems like China just undercuts people in labor, materials, everything, basically. Because again, the government is going to pay for the majority of it, while someone at the top basically is profiting off of this, right? It's a one hand washes the other type of thing, guys. But it's crazy. No other companies around the world can generally like compete with this. Now, when it comes to income inequality, like you kind of stated earlier, this is absolutely true. There are people, again, making less than $240 on the high end, let's say, all right, on a monthly basis, while there are millionaires walking around, 100 millionaires walking around. Remember what I said earlier, one hand washes the other? That.
This way, China's
Corruption.
whole goal was to drive out all the foreign competition out of business.
Right.
And slowly, Chinese companies will be only companies making steel. That means if there's ever a war, other countries will not have their factories up and running, while China will have their factories producing much more than the Chinese economy needs.
Right.
Now, the crazy part is, US wasn't the first country to point this out. In fact, countries like Pakistan and Russia were the first countries to sue China in the World Trade Organization for this illegal practice. Here's the details. China was targeted by a record number of trade investigations by the WTO, the World Trade Organization members, last year, as the country's booming exports swamped the international markets and triggered an outcry from its trading partners. Beijing was subject to 198 trade investigations alleging dumping or illegal subsidies by partners in 2024, double the tally from the previous year, and accounting for nearly half of all measures reported to the Global Trade Organization. So I want to explain this in a little bit more details. WTO, the World Trade Organization, has 166 members, and last year there were roughly 400 cases that were filed with the WTO. Almost half of them, 198, were just against one country, China. So there are 166 countries, only one seems to be the troublemaker. But for Xi Jinping, problems don't just stop there. Let's look at who are these countries that are filing these cases.
All of their allies.
It's countries like US, Europe, and all these Western blocs, when in reality, that's not the truth. The data shows that 117 cases were initiated by emerging economies, including 37 from India, 19 from Brazil, and 9 from Turkey. So it seems the global south that China seems to be the big supporter of is one of the biggest block of countries that's bringing all the cases. China has 198 cases against it, and
Obviously.
117 are from the global south. So even Chinese allies realize that they're getting the short end of the stick when trading with China. Another shocking country is Pakistan. China has given billions and billions of dollars in loans to Pakistan, and even then, Pakistan realizes that China is not playing fair. Pakistan, to which China is the largest sovereign donor, opened 5 trade cases in 2024 alone, focused on rising imports of printing paper, self-adhesive tape, and chemical products. So even a country that you would think is one of the strongest allies of China is filing cases against China when it comes to Chinese trade practices.
Like, I've seen a lot of country, like figureheads, basically come out and say, hey, listen, guys, we need to find another way to succeed without taking China's loans. If you look at what's been going on basically in East Africa, you'll start to realize that they will specifically give these crazy loans with interest that generally the countries can't afford based off of the GDP, but they don't care, right? So they're locking them into these like predatory, like payday loan type of scenarios. And then when they can't pay or make the specific amount of payment, they will say, hey, listen, just give me your port, right? And so now look at the amount of Chinese owned ports on East Africa, okay, in East Africa. Pay attention, guys. All right. There is an issue. Okay. I don't want to sit here and forecast things, but I think at least within the next couple of decades, we're going to have an issue. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting here. It seems like they're setting up for like a lot of weird things, and that's just my vibe, guys. That's what I feel. As this specific kerfuffle is, ramping up.
And it doesn't just stop at Pakistan. Earlier this year, in 2025, Russia put sanctions against Chinese companies because they didn't want Chinese companies dumping their material, dumping their products in Russian markets. Russia is a country that's heavily dependent on China to continue this senseless war that Putin started. But even Russia is making sure that China cannot carry out its unfair trade practices in the Russian economy. Once we look at all this, we realize that problem isn't the United States fighting against China. Problem is China.
Yeah.
Even though China is trying to frame this trade war as US versus the world, in reality, it's China versus everyone else. And everyone wants to make sure China plays by the rules that it agreed to when it got into the World Trade Organization. So, it makes you wonder, what is Xi Jinping doing after all these complaints? Well, he's going around on an emergency trip to Cambodia, Vietnam, and Malaysia. But he's not bringing gifts, he's bringing warnings. He's telling all these countries that they're dependent on China, and if they go against China and side with the United States, they will pay a heavy price. Here's more details.
Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in Vietnam. As he begins a tour of Southeast Asia, Xi will hold talks with Vietnam's Prime Minister, where he's expected to urge a coordinated response to President Donald Trump's trade tariffs. Trump hit Vietnam with a tariff rate of 46%, but that has been paused for 90 days. The country is a key player in the supply chain that delivers products to the United States. Many companies shifted production to Vietnam after Trump imposed tariffs on Chinese firms in 2018 during his first term.
I think Xi Jinping will be very keen to remind Vietnam of its great dependence on China. So Vietnam is an export-driven economy. It sells things like smartphones and clothing all over the world, but it can't do that without components from China, without fabric from China. So it really needs this relationship. It also depends on China for foreign investment. A lot of roads and railways and bridges in Vietnam are being built by China. So I think if they risk angering China on that side, they also stand to lose a lot here.
Now, this is a perfect example of what we are fighting against. Isn't the whole argument that we don't want to be so dependent on China for trade that if there's ever a war, China will use trade as a leverage?
They definitely are going to, guys. Period. I mean, I don't really see an end to this here. Not really. Like, not a healthy one for everyone. I mean, listen, we need to firstly get China out of the stock market in the United States of America. They have the ability, well, how about this? They consistently, falsify documents. And how can a company be, successfully and invested into in the stock market? I'm trying to think here, guys. Either way, but how can a company be successfully invested in, right, in the stock market if the majority of, let's say, the records are false, right? I mean, I would hate to be. I specifically look to see where these companies are located, right? I want to make sure if I'm going to be investing into the stock market, it's not going to be something China oriented ever, never. Right? That's when you start seeing like stocks, consistently splitting and all this other weird stuff, and you lose money. It's just all scams, guys. It's consistently scams. But all right, guys, listen. If you guys are new here, please like and subscribe. The more that you like this type of content, the more that I'll do more of this type of content, guys. Right? But I'm just waiting for this to end. I have no idea how it's going to end. I just hope that it ends well. And not at the loss of like too much, guys. Right? I know it's going to be painful, like 100%. I know that this entire process is going to be moderately painful for us, but I'm just waiting for this to end, bro. I'm sure you guys are too, guys. All right? All right. I'll catch you guys later.